I've got some new footage I'm pretty sure you haven't seen yet of Joe Biden that'll make you wonder why they let him out in front of the cameras at all. And we're going to have plenty of action right here in the Man Cave with all your Tuesday night favorites. Now, let's head to Milwaukee for the Republican National Convention. I mean, hey, that's the only reason to go to Milwaukee anyway, right? Sorry, I kid. If you're watching this in Milwaukee, please send your complaints to me, care of the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, Ultimo. So, anyway, the RNC. A couple of big things. One, we saw Donald Trump earlier today for the first time since an assassin's bullet miraculously, and I don't use that word lightly, clipped only his ear while he was speaking in Pennsylvania over the weekend. But that's not all. We also heard the news, the long-awaited news of who Trump's vice presidential pick would be. And that was none other than Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Let's have a look at the moment the news hit the floor and Trump walked in with his pick.
My honor to nominate Ohio Senator J.D. Vance for the office of Vice President of the United States of America.
Well, let me throw my cards on the table. I think this was a great choice. Look at the other options he had. Marco Rubio was a tryhard, nobody had heard of Doug Burgum, and Kristi Noem had shot a dog. So, they're all out. But even beyond this little process of elimination, J.D. Vance is a spectacular choice, and let me explain why. You see, right now, the normal so-called expert political advice for Trump would be telling him that he should have gone for somebody who was a so-called moderate. Somebody who could broaden the base. Somebody who could go out there and reassure nervous suburban voters that Trump isn't nuts, that the VP will be there to moderate him and the administration. You know, basically the idea would be that the VP pick would be someone to keep the White House plugged into the blob or the swamp or the deep state or whatever you want to call that vast freedom-killing bureaucracy that Trump has vowed to tear down. But, as is his wont, Trump went the other way from the experts. And J.D. Vance is a serious conservative. He's spoken at national conservatism conferences. That's, by the way, a movement you are going to hear a lot more about in the coming weeks, trust me. And J.D. Vance has an incredible resume that has taken him from a childhood in a small, absolutely dirt poor town in southern Ohio to the Marines, to Iraq, to Yale Law School, to venture capital, and then to the Senate. This is the American dream. He wrote a book about it. They made a movie of it too called Hillbilly Elegy. Now, politically, again, Vance is a conservative populist, and a skeptic on the sort of free trade that gutted the local economy where he grew up. And he equally detests the sort of neoconservative foreign policy that he saw when he was in Iraq. He signed up, by the way, for that after 9/11, for what was the original so-called Forever War. Now, for Trump, strategically picking this guy enables a few things to happen. Number one, it means that Vance can be the attack dog, and Trump can run a much more positive campaign. Think John Howard and Peter Costello, by the way, in Parliament, if you want an Australian analogy there. But number two, it also means that, assuming the Trump-Vance ticket gets into office, well, it means that Democrats in Congress or prosecutors with a grudge or whomever else will be less likely to try and impeach Trump and get him out of office. You see, Vance, in the number 2 seat, acts as an insurance policy. If you take down Trump, you'll get the same, but worse, and in the body of someone who is right now only 39 years old. That age, by the way, is fascinating, too. I mean, the torch is really passing here, and it shows the huge generational difference here. Remember, Vance served in the Iraq War. Biden voted for it. Now, thirdly, this pick gives the Republicans a real narrative of economic opportunity. Again, Vance made it out of a dirt-poor former factory town to the heights of American success. The Trump narrative will be, let's make this a country where this is possible again. And all of this now brings us to the other side of the equation, Joe Biden and the Democrats, and of course, much of the media, which are now in absolutely full freak-out mode. By the way, speaking of the media, I have to show you this fantastic moment from the floor of the convention today. Check out what happened here when some hapless MSNBC correspondent bailed up young Donald Trump Jr. at the convention.
If the media actually starts being an honest broker, talking about the things that he did, the prosperity he brought, the peace deals that he signed around the world, rather than the disaster that we're living right now, I think you'd do everyone in the country a big favor.
I know immigration's important to him. I covered the family separation crisis closely. Will we continue to see policies like separating 5,000 children deliberately from their parents?
You mean the Obama administration?
You know they didn't do that, sir.
Okay, sure.
Will there be a second family separation policy?
It's MSDNC, so I expect nothing less from you clowns. Even today, even 48 hours later, you couldn't wait. You couldn't wait with your lies and with your nonsense. So just get out of here.
And that, my friends, is how it is done. Meanwhile, this is how it's not done. Look, last night, you'll recall I talked about how the Democrats have a real fundamental problem now in the wake of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. On the one hand, they say they want to lower the temperature of discourse. We should all be nice and kind, as Joe Biden said from the Oval Office yesterday. On the other hand, if the Democrats and the left really are serious about lowering the temperature, well, that means they can't keep calling Trump the second coming of Adolf Hitler, who will end American democracy. Now, this, of course, has put the Democrats in a real tight spot, because if it's true that they really believe that Donald Trump, of all people, will suddenly end the 240-year American experiment in small R Republican governance, that all the checks and balances and courts and constraints can be undone by one man, well, sorry, Democrats, but it doesn't sound like you've got a lot of faith in the American system you claim to treasure and venerate. But meanwhile, if the Democrats have to stop talking now about how Donald Trump is an absolutely existential and presumably must be eliminated threat to American democracy, well, then they'll have nothing left to sell to voters but fear. Now, guess what? The great White House brains trust, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Karine Jean-Pierre, the chiefs of staff, all of them, though, they've put on their thinking caps. They've gone into solution mode. And they've come up with this.
The view is that Trump and the MAGA Republican agenda is a threat to democracy. So how do you get that message across while bringing the temperature down? How is that phrasing going to be replaced? Is it going to be replaced?
Well, look, what I can say is this. We have our differences, and it's okay to have our differences. And it is okay to speak to someone's record, to speak to someone's character.
Well, as Karine Jean-Pierre would say, what I can say is this. It sounds to me like that's code for, we're just going to keep calling the other guys fascists because, hey, we're the good guys, right? We're Democrats. Now, the Biden White House simply can't be fascists. They'd never put their leader on a blood-red set, flanked with flags and military people to denounce the opposition as beyond the pale, would they?
Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic.
Now, of course, they would never do anything like that, and that certainly didn't look at all fascist to me, really. Anyway, that was just a couple of years ago, and of course, the message of the Biden White House is still the same. Joe Biden, the Democrats, good. Trump and the Republicans, bad. But the messenger, Joe Biden, well, he's a little less slick than he was back then. Because while the GOP was having its Milwaukee love-in, Gosh, I guess that's the first time that phrase has ever been used before. The president was giving an interview to NBC. Let's have a look.
You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that
I didn't say crosshairs.
Oh, he didn't say crosshairs, so okay. Much better then. Now, Joe Biden was also asked if he'd spoken to Kimberly Cheadle, the director of the Secret Service, and he appeared to not know that she is a she.
Is it acceptable that you have still not heard, at least publicly, from the Secret Service director?
Oh, I've heard from him.
But have you heard from her publicly?
Publicly, I've sat down in a situation room downstairs.
I've heard from him, he said. Well, you know, I gotta say, this is a common problem for Democrats these days, not knowing what is a woman, I suppose. And then there was this.
Trump has said he's giving you a chance to redeem yourself. Basically, the idea of engaging in another debate.
We're going to have another debate.
Yeah, you're going to have one in September that's on the books. Would you be open to doing one in the next few weeks?
I'm going to debate him when we agreed to debate, and I'm going to debate him in September.
But if the opportunity came up to do one between now and then, is there a sense of wanting to get back on the horse?
I'm on the horse. Where have you been? I've done 22 major events, met thousands of people, overwhelming crowds, a lot happening. I'm on the horse. What I'm doing is going out and demonstrating to the American people that I have command of all my faculties, that I don't need notes, I don't need teleprompter. I can go out and answer any questions at all.
As Marge Simpson might say, yes, Joe, overwhelming crowds in your mind. Look, when you're explaining, you're losing. And when you're having to explain to the American people that as president, you really are still compos mentis and up to the job, well, forgive me for saying this, but just maybe you aren't.